Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and welcome back to me talking about books, but also video games. Well, today we're doing something slightly different, because I would like to combine two of my favorite hobbies today. Namely, today we are going to talk about books, so reading, but we're also going to talk about video games. So, I do love me some good books, as you may or may not know from the videos on my channel, but I also love me a good video game. Now, I don't talk about video games all that often on this channel. I usually just do like a ranking of all the video games I play at the end of the year. But today I was thinking we're gonna combine both things. Namely, today I would like to present to you, the book lovers, video games that you might enjoy. So, what are we doing? I'm gonna take a look at my notes here so I know what I'm actually talking about here. So today, I would like to propose video games to the book lovers out there in a way that hopefully appeals to them. Meaning, I'm coming from a point of view of, I'm talking to someone who loves reading different kinds of genres, is really into the big novels and all that, but maybe isn't that familiar with gaming as a hobby, hasn't really played that many video games, or maybe hasn't really played video games in a while, or is maybe a bit weary of getting into video games. I'm talking to those people, because I want to tell you, hey, there are fun video games out there that are not overly complicated and they are relatively easy to get into, and some of them are actually really good for people who love books and who love reading. So I'm going to present you games that are mostly more or less quote-unquote casual, I guess. I'm trying to mostly stay away from like those super big, super famous games that involve a lot of complex gameplay you need time to get into. So while yes, obviously if you're into fantasy you would probably enjoy The Witcher, you're not gonna hear me suggest those games, because I'm trying to suggest games that are easy to get into, that appeal to people who have maybe never even played video games before. So I'm trying to keep it more low-key, I'm trying to keep it a bit more casual and beginner-friendly. So what are the genres that I'm mostly going to talk about here in regards to video games? So, as a preamble, so you understand some of the terms I'm going to use later. So, there is actually a genre in video games called visual novels. And visual novels, as you may guess from the title, is a novel with pictures you can play. Those are games that are very heavily text-based. There is almost no gameplay. Some visual novels don't even have any gameplay apart from just clicking to make the text move, basically. And you're getting some visuals presented with that. But it's very much focused on storytelling. It wants to tell an engaging, interesting story with interesting characters. And you're gonna do a lot of reading. So that's what visual novels are. That's probably the most obvious type of game to get into if you already love reading. And connected to that, we have the more interactive games, what I would like to call the more Telltale-esque games or interactive movies. So Telltale is a series of games which is very much focused also on telling a story and its characters, and it has minimal gameplay, and they're very much intended to be interactive movies. They are focused on telling an interesting story with cool characters, and it's very much about you playing as these characters, making choices that will impact the story. Again, here the gameplay is more or less minimal. It's more like about walking around, engaging with the environment. It's all about interacting with the characters in the world. These types of games are there to immerse yourself in a world, to become one of the characters there, to familiarize yourself with the protagonist you're playing, and to make choices as that protagonist within the world. The Telltale series became very famous for making those kinds of games, but there are also other games who have a similar vibe, that are basically just like interactive movies. They're there to be a visual spectacle, to tell a really cool story, and they want you to get involved with that story by making choices. And the third bigger genre I would like to mention here is walking simulator. Now, walking simulator sounds a bit boring at first, and yes, some people in the gaming community use it in a more negative way to tag games as, oh, boring, you're just walking around. But no, walking simulator basically just means it's a more or less casual game which is about you walking around, engaging with the environment. A lot of these games are first-person POV, which is where, you know, walking simulator, because you're simulating the walking, like you're watching through the eyes of that character you're playing. But some of those are also in third person. Again, gameplay is more or less minimal here. It's more about engaging with the narrative and with the world around you. You become a character in a setting that's usually very elaborate, full of detail, and you're exploring that world. It's really all about the world building, finding little intricate details or characters within that world. And the game is just asking you to like go out and explore, engage with the environment, and find out some stuff about yourself, about the characters, or the world around you. Those are sort of the three bigger genres that we will encounter in this list. There will be some other genres mentioned. For example, RPG means role-playing game. I think we're all familiar with that. There will be also more action-focused games here and there. Some of them will maybe also have roguelike or roguelite elements. I will explain those as we get to them. But mostly I want to focus on like those three primary genres I presented to you. Now, how will I do this? Now, I will do this by presenting you a game. You will see a visual for the game here. And then under that, you will see the four most important or main characteristics of that game that you need to know. So first off, we have the overall genre. So that's like, is it a fantasy game? Is it horror? Is it romance? YA? That. Because those genres are more or less the same for books and for games. So a fantasy reader will probably be interested in fantasy video games, something like that. So that's the overall genre. Below that we have the genre of the game. So here I will tell you if this is more more of a walking simulator, if this is more an action game, if this is an RPG, if this is a visual novel, that. Then third bullet point is how much gameplay. So here I'm going to tell you how much you actually have to do. Gameplay meaning how much button pressing is there, essentially. How much does the game want you to actually like press buttons and do things that require hand-eye coordination with the screen. So there will be minimal gameplay, there will be some gameplay, like the game asks you to do some stuff, but it's not too complicated, and then there will be more expert level gameplay where the game basically really asks you to like learn things, how to press certain buttons to make certain things happen and all that. And then as a fourth bullet point here, I have gaming knowledge. That's essentially supposed to mean how much previous experience do you need to have with video games to really be able to get into it. So similar to gameplay, there will be something like minimal or none. So this is like really one for the newbies. Even if you've never played a video game before, you'll be able to play this and probably have fun with it. Then we have like some gameplay or like similar to some gameplay, we have like some gaming knowledge. Like it's good if you have played a couple of video games before, to like familiarize yourself with some stuff, but even maybe if you don't have that much video game knowledge, you'll still be fine. And then we have, you know, the gamer. So you actually need to have some experience with video games to be really able to get into this. I divided this list by genres, more or less. Some of these will have overlap that I will mention. But yeah, let's just jump into it. I think I comprise like 20 plus games, and I hope we can find something for everyone in this, so let's go. Okay, let's start somewhere in the Litfig area. The first game I would like to present to you is Firewatch. Firewatch is a walking simulator about a man who is married, but his marriage is recently going through some troubles because his wife is sick. And he takes on a new job to take care of the forest, to go on fire watch, so he can deal with his feelings and with his life and just sort of get a clear head. And you play as this middle-aged man as he takes on this new job as the fire watchman. In this unpopulated area, you're interacting with basically no one. The only other person you interact with is a woman that you talk to over a walkie-talkie that you never see. She's like sort of the only connection you have to the outside world as you explore the forest and do your job. This is a more casual game. It's more focused on exploring the inner life of this main character as he basically deals with his feelings through his new job. You very much walk around the forest a lot. It's all about exploring nature, about exploring the forest. You pick up cans, you clean up after some hooligans in the forest. You try to tell people to not do things, to not set the forest on fire. There's also a little bit of a mystery that someone might have gone missing in the woods, or that there's maybe someone in the forest who is watching you, but you're not quite sure. There's a little tower you're staying in, and it's all a bit mysterious, but still on the casual side. It's very much about just like walking around, exploring the forest, doing some jobs. There's a bit of a mystery, but nothing like too big and exciting. But it's a very personal, sweet story that requires very minimal gameplay. It's really just about you walking around, looking at things, and just having interesting interactions with the lady over the walkie-talkie. And I think this is a very sweet and emotional personal journey. Next one I would like to talk about is Night in the Woods. Night in the Woods is a personal favorite of mine. You could not quite classified as YA because the characters in this game are older. So this is a game about a cat girl who is returning to her old home. She's just left university because of an emotional mental journey she's going through, and she has to return home to her parents, to the town that she grew up in. And there she interacts with some of those people for the first time in years. She reconnects with old friends, meets some new people, reconnects with her parents, reconnects with her roots. And it's very much about this girl coming to terms with her decisions in the past, trying to find out what she wants to do now. It's about dealing with consequences of her past actions. And at the same time, there's a little small town mystery going on. There are seemingly people going missing, some trouble with some kids. Like, there's a bit of a mystery going on that you explore together with your friends. And it's really about the connections this girl has with her parents and with the people in the towns, about reconnecting with old friends, interacting with them, sort of like realizing, people change, but how much do they change? And yeah, it's just like a really cozy emotional journey, I think. Requires, I would say, minimal to middling gameplay. Like, there is some jumping around, there are some fun mini games, like you play music, you have to press some buttons to make the music sound good, some fun little mini games, but nothing like too complex. I'm personally a big fan of the art style as well, and the music as well, and this is great. It's very casual, it has great autumn vibes, especially the game. So yeah, if you're on the lookout for a sort of like not quite coming of age story, but sort of similar, then I think you will have fun with A Night in the Woods. Then I would like to talk about the game Tell Me Why. Tell Me Why is more in the category of sort of like Telltale-esque interactive movie kind of game. This is a episodic game which tells the story of twins, a brother and a sister, who are returning to their hometown. One of the twins is a trans guy, and now he's returned to his hometown, to the people who mostly knew him before he transitioned. And now these siblings are coming back to their old place, to where they grew up, and they're trying to reconnect with their past. They're trying to figure out what has happened to their mother, because there was an incident in the past where the mother was seemingly very heavily triggered by her son, and did something awful. And now the siblings are trying to sort of reconnect with that event, to reconnect with the past, to figure out what has actually happened on that day. There is a magical realism, supernatural element to it, as these twins share a very deep connection that expresses itself in sort of them having like memory powers. This is very much represented within the gameplay, where you do like have flashbacks and it's very visual. You go into the past, you listen to the voice of the past, you try to decide, okay, what has actually happened, and what you decide has happened will also form the story. There are also interactions with some other characters and choices you can make within those interactions that will shape your relationship with those characters. There are some little romance subplots as well that you can have if you want to. Again, it's not quite YA because these characters are, I think, like 21 years old. But it sort of has, I think, a similar vibe. So if you're on the lookout for like this very much like queer, a slice of life, sibling found family vibe with a touch of mystery and a touch of magical realism, Tell Me Why is a good game to play, which doesn't require too much game knowledge. Again, there are some gaming elements in this, but nothing all that much. It's mostly about like walking around, interacting with the environment, and making choices in the dialogue. And now a more broader category, because we're in Litfic, I would like to also include here classic literature. Classic literature is also very much represented within video games. There are many adaptations of classic literature, so I'm just gonna name like a couple here. For example, there are a bunch of Sherlock Holmes video games. Obviously, I started playing Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 a while ago, which is more about like a prologue to Sherlock's personal story. Then you have Sherlock Holmes Crime and Punishment and Sherlock Holmes and the Devil's Daughter, which are more like classic detective games where you go out, look at crime scenes, solve cases. There's that. I also played Hercule Poirot's The ABC Murders. There's a game for that as well. Another game I personally also like is To Be or Not to Be, which is a interactive retelling of Hamlet, where you can choose which main character you want to experience the story as, and then you can either just play classically through the story of Hamlet or can deviate from the story of Hamlet however you want. So that's just me telling you, hey, there are games out there that probably somehow represent your favorite classic novel. That's very much a thing. Now, coming back to this YA vibe that I spoke about with Tell Me Why, we're actually jumping to a game that, at least developmentally speaking, is connected to Tell Me Why. Namely, for the YA genre, I would like to present to you the Life is Strange series. The Life is Strange series currently consists of 4 games, 5th one coming out later this year. And honestly, this is perfect for everyone who's really into like YA, teenage, coming of age, emotional drama. This is the series for you. Some of these games are connected to each other, some of them are not. The first one's obviously the best way to start. I think it's also one of the most beloved games in the series. So what you need to know about Life is Strange. Life is Strange is a series about teenagers or young adults who are very much going through a difficult point in their, like a difficult time in their life. Something will have happened and they have to deal with that, and it's all about growing up, making friends, falling out with friends, coming to terms with who you are and what has happened. But there's always a supernatural touch to those stories. Usually the main character of those games will have some kind of supernatural power. So for example, in the first game, Max Caulfield, who is the main character, she develops time travel powers, namely that she can travel back in time for a couple of moments to redo certain things. So there will be you can have interactions in that game where you can say, oh, I didn't like how that interaction went, and you can rewind and then do that interaction again with more knowledge, with more hindsight. So that is very much a mechanic of that game. In Life is Strange 2, we have 2 brothers. One of them develops like telekinesis powers. In True Colors, you have a protagonist who can feel the emotions of other people and take them on, but also change them. So there's always like a slightly like magical realism, supernatural touch to those games. But what those games really are about is the characters and their interactions among one another. Like, it's really all about the main character and their interactions with the people around them and with the environment they live in. There will always be some kind of significant event or multiple significant events that impact them in some way, shape, or form, or has to do with their power they're now developing, and then they have to deal with the consequences of those actions. And there's usually some kind of mystery either surrounding their power or surrounding something else that is happening in their life. So this series is really all about the coming of age YA personal drama that you could want. It's all about, you know, falling in love with people, hating people, people betraying each other, like petty high school bullying, like all that is within this series. And it's honestly one of my favorite video game series out there. It has minimal gameplay. I would argue it's more like a interactive movie or a walking simulator where you play the main character, interact with the environment, solve some little puzzles, but it's mostly about, you know, interacting, making decisions within the game, decisions that will impact the narrative and your relationship to those other people. And sometimes you will have to do like some little things with your powers, but nothing too out there. So I think it's good for people who are really into like YA narratives and maybe shy away from too complex gameplays. So this game series is perfect for that. Now let's jump into some more fantastical stuff. Next up, I would like to talk about Hellblade. Now, Hellblade, I've only played the first Hellblade. I know there's a new one, Hellblade 2, but I'm talking about the first one, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. This is a very gritty, graphically beautiful game about a young Celtic warrior who suffers from psychosis and schizophrenia, and she's on her way to save her boyfriend from essentially from hell, from the underworld. Now, this is a very emotionally heavy and psychological game. Like, the makers of this game did a lot of research in regards to how to portray the mental illness of the main character. And you should probably check for trigger warnings to see if you really do feel up to play this game. However, it's a very immersive game. It's beautiful. It's graphically, like, astonishing. It's really beautiful. It has some gameplay, like there is some combat in this. However, the combat is very minimal. It's like mostly relegated to like pressing only 2 or 3 buttons. There's some puzzle solving. It's more about that, like finding runes or finding little things within the environment. It's really more about like walking around, experiencing the story, experiencing the setting alongside the main character who has this undefined illness where she hears voices. And the sound design for this is great because you constantly hear those voices, always the main character is also hearing as well, like doubting you or throwing in some commentary that you just can't shut out. And this is really one for the people who are more like into historical, like fantasy. This is very much like based on Norse mythology, obviously. So this is like really an intense game, narratively intense and also beautifully looking. You might need to have like some little experience with gaming going into this. However, if you're willing to like put some effort into it, I think you will have a lot of fun with it. Staying with the supernatural, of course, we also have some vampire games in here. I would like to talk about Vampire. Now, Vampire is arguably maybe the most complex game I will talk about here, like gameplay-wise, like because this is a proper RPG, meaning role-playing game, meaning this game really demands you to get into it with the gameplay, to learn button combinations. There's skill tree, meaning you have to build up your character from the ground up, teach them skills, you have to learn how to use them and how to make them happen by pressing certain buttons. So this is more recommended for people who are already quite familiar with video games. However, if you're willing to get into this, you will get a vampire gothic story with a historical setting. This is set right after World War I, during the Spanish flu. You play Jonathan, a war medic who just came back from the war and has been turned into a vampire. And now he has to find out who is his creator, how will he now live as a vampire, especially since, you know, he's a man of medicine. He doesn't want to kill people, but maybe he has to kill people because now he's a vampire. He has to drink blood and all that. So it's very much about that, and it's about engaging with the environment and the people that live there in London, in this London written like that is completely like down the drain. Essentially, it's filled with people who are suffering for multiple reasons, also especially because of the Spanish flu, which is essentially there are major COVID vibes to this game. Also, like I played this during the first lockdown wave in 2020, so that was good timing for me when I played that. So you can walk about London, engage with all the different people living there. They're like the different districts of London. It's about you interacting with them, finding out what their stories are, and then obviously you can decide, do you want to eat them or not? And depending on how you deal with these people and how you make certain choices within the narrative, it will have impact on your surroundings, on the economy and the society of London. And meanwhile, while all that's happening, Jonathan is trying to find out who his maker is, what's the deal with like the secret London society of vampire and vampire hunters, naturally. So this one is very much one for people who are like really into the supernatural, major like dark gothic vibes. I can honestly recommend this. Was one of my favorite games that I played in 2020. Like, sure, some of the mechanics are a bit wonky, but honestly, it's really more about, you know, the characters and getting to know them. And there are lengthy conversations, so you will still get a lot of like listening if you want to put listening and reading if you want to put it like that. But I had a lot of fun with that one. Staying with the more historical slash fantasy adjacent things, I want to talk about The Council. The Council, similar to the Life is Strange games, it is an episodic game which is about a main character walking around, engaging with their environment and their characters around them. So this is a game that can be, it's sort of like an interactive movie slash walking simulator about a young Frenchman who is a detective, and he's invited to this strange island which is inhabited by a bunch of historically and politically important people. And he is there to find a certain person, to find out what has happened to someone. So he's there to solve a case. And yes, there you will meet some historically significant people. For example, Napoleon is there before he was, you know, the big guy. And you are essentially there to uncover the mysteries of that island and the mysteries of the people that interact with you. I will say this is a little more intricate and detailed than the Life is Strange games. This requires a little bit more gameplay. This also includes some light RPG elements, so you will have certain skills that your detective can have, that you can assign to him. So you really do sort of like build your own detective depending on what you want him to focus on. If you want him to be a bit more of like a Sherlock Holmes kind of guy, if you want him to be a bit more of like a supernatural detective. So you can sort of decide that by yourselves. It is a little bit tricky for a kind of like, you know, interactive kind of game. There are some good puzzles in it, some of them easy, some of them really hard. So like if you're like someone who's a bit more all about like logical thinking and puzzling, that's the game for you. There will be some like narrative choices in there that you may or may not enjoy. Like it certainly mixes like the historical with the like slightly fantastical. Some of you may like that, some of you will not. But I thought it was quite interesting because usually like these types of like walking simulators or interactive movies don't really include that many like gameplay mechanics, and this one does include like, you know, a little bit in terms of like there's a skill tree and you can build your character. Like there's a bit more to it, so maybe play some other similar types of games with less gameplay before you jump into this one. But if you're like into like complex historical settings with like more of a fantastical setting, I think this is a good game for you. Now, staying with the fantastical, Game of Thrones. Telltale Game of Thrones. Yes, I mean, obviously I'm going to talk about some Telltale games here. So I mentioned earlier, Telltale is a company that's made, or is making again, games that are very much sort of intended to be interactive movies, where you take on the role of a certain specific character within a universe, and you are tasked with living a story, an episodic story, that's usually told in like 4 or 5 episodes. And Telltale has also very much made games based on existing property. One of them, Game of Thrones. And I feel like I have to mention Game of Thrones because, you know, it's fantasy. So we have to kind of mention Game of Thrones here, don't we? Now, warning, with this one, I should mention, this is only season 1, but it was never continued because Telltale shut down. Now they're back. Maybe we will get a second season of this game in the future, but for now, this game series is unfinished. It tells a good overall story for most of its characters. However, it has an open ending, very much intended to be like, oh, there will be more in the future. So know that going into this. However, if you are a fan of the show or the books, I think you will have a lot of fun with this. Like, I replayed this a couple of years ago after the show ended, had a lot of fun with it. They bring some of the actors back to voice their actual characters from the show. So, you know, Peter Dinklage is there, Cersei is there, Mother of Dragons, Daenerys, like that actress is there as well. But the game itself is focused on a new family that the game makes up, who live in the north of King's Landing, north of King's Landing? No, in the north of the kingdom. And they are involved more or less with different people from the show. So they have to deal with, you know, business in the north. There's Ramsay going on, so they have to deal with the Boltons. One member of the family lives in King's Landing, so she deals with Cersei and Tyrion. So there is a lot of like political intrigue. We also have someone who is more in the south where Daenerys lives, so we have some interaction between those characters as well. So there's a lot of like intricate and complex storytelling going on, just as we know from the show. It includes like all the classic elements of, you know, political intrigue, betrayal, who do you trust. This one is really all about the character interactions and you deciding who do you trust, what do you want to do, and what are the repercussions of your choices. It's mostly minimal gameplay. It's mostly about making choices, which are timed, so be aware of that. And most of the gameplay you get in this is really just like walking around, interacting, doing dialogue, and maybe press a button once or twice really fast to make things happen. That's it. And I don't even think you have to have that much pre-knowledge of the show or the books to get into it. I think they do explain things quite well in this. And story-wise, this is set sort of like towards the end of season 3 and beginning of season 4, just like as a general notion. But if you haven't played this game and are a fan of the show or the books, check it out. Staying with the fantastical, I would like to talk about Dance of Death, Dulac and Fae. Now this one is one for the King Arthur fans out there. Now I played this one 2 or 3 years ago. This one is also more of a walking simulator, almost point and click. This is really about 2 characters, or mostly 1 character, interacting with the world, solving a mystery. So this combines sort of like Victorian London, like Victorian literature and all of that stuff, with the Arthurian legend. So you play Lancelot, who comes to Victorian London with a woman who at that point in time is a dog. But if you're familiar with the legend, you will soon realize who this actually is. And they come there at a time where Jack the Ripper is actually active. So they combine the Arthurian legend with the stories of Jack the Ripper and some other Victorian literature elements. And it's your job to find out what has happened. Like, who is getting involved in these crimes? Who are the women that get murdered? What's the combination like there between Jack the Ripper and those murders and whatever King Arthur and all those characters and the fantastic elements of that have to do with it. Obviously, they're combined in this. This one is more of like, again, more casual. It's mostly just about walking around, clicking on stuff, talking to people. This one is more focused on like doing actual detective work and doing puzzle solving. So if you're not only a fan of like fantasy and legend stories, but also someone who likes to solve a good puzzle, I think this is a good one for you. And now, of course, I have to do something for the D&D fans out there. We have Knights of Pen and Paper. There are actually 2 of these. So Knights of Pen and Paper is a game very much made in like this old-timey pixel kind of graphic. And it basically is a D&D simulator. And it's very meta about it. So this game basically casts you in the role of several characters. So this game presents you a setting, a D&D campaign, where the dungeon master, like you actually see the table, you have a dungeon master sitting there, and then you have several characters that you yourself can create who are going on a D&D adventure. So you can create several characters, several types of characters, depending on, like, obviously the D&D classes, mixed in with the races, which are sometimes just like digs at nerdy stereotypes, which is quite fun. So you can create like pretty funny and wacky kind of fantasy characters, and then it very much plays like D&D. Like you go and travel, you kill some monsters, you roll dice for doing stuff, you only have a certain amount of actions you can take, you travel around the map, incidents happen. It's all very old-fashioned, I think. So this is perfect for people who are already fans of D&D, or some people who maybe want to get into D&D but are a bit weary of it, because I think this game makes it quite easy. It's really just mostly about like clicking on stuff. The game explains most of the things you're doing anyway. It has some light RPG elements because it is a D&D simulator, so to speak, but nothing overly complicated. I think the style and the meta kind of like joking narrative makes this quite a charming game, or two games actually. Let's stay with the fantastical for a bit more, because let's dive into some romantasy, I guess, or romance. I mean, people who watch my channel know I'm not the biggest romance guy, but hey, I still want to give you romance people something. So the first one I would like to talk about here is Romancylvania. Now, Romancylvania, for people who don't know, is a pun on obviously the word romance and also on Castlevania. Castlevania is a quite famous and popular gaming series that's existed for many years and has actually created an entire genre of games, which mostly means they're mostly known for like having 2D side-scrolling games which are about jumping around, fighting enemies. It's a bit more difficult, dodging stuff, really managing like your button inputs, like really getting good at the game to get through the levels fast. Almost kind of like roguelite almost, for the gaming people out there. However, Romancylvania takes a step back and combines this type of game with a dating simulator. So dating simulator, as you can imagine, is a video game that wants you to date people. And there are a bunch of those out there. I would argue that dating simulators are sort of similar to visual novels. It's a lot about interacting with characters, just talking to them, reading their interactions, and then just making choices during those conversations. And Romancylvania basically combines these two things. So you will have interactions with people as Dracula. You play a femme or a mask Dracula who is looking for a new partner on a reality TV show. And you go out, find some people and talk to them, and if you like one of them, you will be able to woo them and hopefully romance them. And during those interactions, you will be able to go on and play levels similar to a Castlevania game to advance your own character, to advance your skills, to advance your romances. So they very much combine these two elements. So this is very much for the people who do love this aspect of, you know, reading, just interacting with people, just having fun with the dialogue, but also people who still want a bit more gameplay, who want to have a bit more to do. So I would argue this is a game for people who are already a little more familiar with gameplay, or like gaming in general. However, this is not as hardcore as a normal Castlevania game, so I think there's still somewhat of a good entry level here if you want to try this. This is a little weird, funny, a little bit cringe maybe as well, a little cheesy. It's also very, very meta and sort of self-aware of what it's doing. It's not like trying to take itself too seriously. But if you're like on the lookout for funny vampire romance, maybe try Romancylvania. And another one for the romance fans, let's talk about Boyfriend Dungeon. I love Boyfriend Dungeon, and I'm saying this as someone who's usually not into romance. Now, Boyfriend Dungeon combines the visual novel with the roguelite element. Now, you've heard me mention roguelite or roguelike before. Maybe for those who are uninitiated, there are roguelikes and there are roguelites. There's a bit of a difference between them. Roguelikes are usually known for being more on the tougher side of gaming. I would argue that there are about combat where you play a character who goes through randomly generated dungeons, so they look different every time. The enemies you fight there are different every time, and it's really all about your skill, fighting your way through these dungeons, and something will always be different every run. And every time you die or lose, you will start from scratch. So it's really all about, you know, making progress, getting better with each try. So that's a roguelike. A roguelite is similar, takes on a lot of elements from the roguelike, however, is, as the name implies, lighter on those elements. So the roguelite will maybe include, like, you know, dungeons where you fight enemies, but, you know, if you die, you don't have to start from scratch. Like, you get to keep some stuff, or you get to keep your progress. Something like that. So Boyfriend Dungeon combines roguelite elements with the visual novel. You play a character who's moving into town, and you get to know people who you, of course, intend to romance, potentially. The catch here is the handsome people you meet, they are also weapons. They will have like a magical girl anime style of transformation, and those handsome, sexy people turn into very sexy weapons that you can use for fighting in the roguelite sections of the game, and that's how you more or less bond with your potential partner. Obviously, there are also visual novel elements where you just get to know those characters, you get to talk to them, get to make some decisions in terms of dialogue, and just woo them, essentially. So similar to Romancylvania, this is a combination of, you know, something you might just like enjoy in general, just already like reading, getting involved just like in the personal story, having fun, but then it also has some like actual gameplay elements where you can go out and do stuff and press some buttons. And I think it combines those two things very well. It's very cute. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but seriously enough. There are various characters from various like backgrounds, also lots of queer identities as well. It's not too difficult, I think, for a roguelite. And you maybe need to have like some little experience with gameplay already. However, if you just want to have a really fun, wholesome, like visual novel dating simulator with some fun gameplay, this is the game for you. Now, let's move on from fantasy to another fantastical genre. Let's do a little bit of sci-fi. And what would sci-fi be without cats? Let's talk about Stray, because of course we need to have a game with an adorable cat in here. So you may have heard about this game. I think it's been quite popular on the internet. It's a more or less recent game. So Stray is about a stray cat that loses its family in a more or less dystopic sci-fi setting. This cat falls down into a city and has to work its way up to come to the surface to reconnect with its family. And the setting of this game is absolutely gorgeous. It's set in this futuristic, slightly dystopian, huge city, which is inhabited by robots, or robotic humanoids that all have very adorable computer faces. And some of them react very, very cutely to you as a cat. So yes, you're a cat in this, so obviously you can do all the cat things. You can meow, you can rub yourself against like the legs of these robots, they can scratch you, you can scratch the post, you can scratch up carpets, you can play with balls, you can throw things off the shelves and all that. You can do all the cat things you always wanted to do in this. And this game explores its dystopian sci-fi-esque setting, I think, very well, like through these innocent eyes of a cat, as you like sort of get to know the lives of those robots that live there, who are clearly going through some stuff, or some of them have seen things, man, and you're sort of like breaking through their barrier, so to speak, as this adorable little creature they've never seen before. And you can't talk. All you can do is like sort of interact with them via, you know, cat motions and a little robot that sort of like talks to you a little bit. This is very much an atmospheric game, all about, you know, the setting and the robots that you talk to. Gameplay, mostly minimal, I would argue. Like, you press buttons to jump around, mostly. That's it. Like, it has one or two tense elements, but I think this is a good entry-level game to get involved in. Staying with sci-fi, let's talk about cyberpunk. Let's talk about State of Mind. Now, State of Mind, I think I've spoken about before on this channel when I highlighted video games I played in, like, I don't know, 2020, 21 or something. If there's something, I can link it up here. State of Mind is set in a futuristic cyberpunk Berlin and is about two men. One of them lives in this very dystopian, dark, cyberpunk setting of Berlin. He's a journalist who's going through some stuff, like his wife left him, he can't see his kid, he wants to see his kid. He's kind of an asshole, but also is trying to do better. He might also lose his job. And while you're playing as him, you have this parallel running storyline about a man who lives essentially in the utopian version of this Berlin. Like, everything's very bright colored and light, and he has a family and a son that he can interact with, but then things start to become a little weird. He's starting to notice things that he maybe shouldn't, and he's sort of trying to figure out what the deal is here. So this is very much a game with a cyberpunk setting. It's all about, you know, transhumanism, who we are, how does the future shape us, how does humanity survive in the future, and how far can we go as humans, how far can we go while still staying humanoid, while still staying true to our human moral values and all that. All like those classic cyberpunk themes. Gameplay wise, this is more like of a walking simulator. This is about really like becoming these two men, getting to know them, getting to know the world they live in, interacting with the people around them, like just walking around, clicking on stuff, solving like some little puzzles, like solving a bit of a narrative mystery essentially that you discover with them as you sort of like unfold more and more elements of the stories, and it becomes more and more complex, asks more and more very sci-fi heavy questions, and has some really good, like, interesting themes, I think. So if you want to look for something like slightly more philosophical, like a bit of a thinker in the sci-fi genre, I think this one's for you. And of course, we have to talk about Star Trek if we talk about sci-fi. So here you go, Star Trek Resurgence. This one is a more recent game. It was one of my favorite games that I played last year. This one is very similar to the Telltale or Life is Strange games, as in this is very much a playable movie. This is basically playable Star Trek episode. You don't need to have major pre-existing knowledge of Star Trek in order to play this. This casts you in the role of completely new characters that do not exist in any of the shows or movies, and you only get like one or two, like I think like maybe three or four characters from the original shows and movies. However, the game will give you enough context so you are able to understand who these people are. And most of these are just cameos anyway. So you don't really need to be like big into Star Trek in order to enjoy this. But, you know, I enjoy Star Trek. I'm a Trekkie, so of course I'm putting this on here, because this is just like a really fun, interesting sci-fi adventure. Honestly, this is like a sci-fi movie you can play. So you take on the role of two characters. You take on the role of just like a lower decks guy. So a guy who just like works in engineering, like your everyday kind of worker on a spaceship. And the other role you take on is of the new number one, so like the second in charge on the ship, who just starts out their job. So you have like these two perspectives of, you know, just like the lower decks normal guy, and the person who like works on the bridge. So you get like the two most important perspectives on the story there. And it's very much a story about not just exploring space, but also of diplomacy, because Star Trek is very big on like space and alien diplomacy as you try to like deal with this conflict between two not quite yet warring alien races and sort of trying to deal with, you know, their conflict that's quite complex, where you really have to get into it, get to know the people behind each race, sort of like decide, okay, who makes a good point, who is just like corrupt or something. And then you really get involved in like their business, in their cultures, getting to know them. And of course, behind that, some bigger mystery is going on that you're solving. So this one is really like just a fun sci-fi adventure that requires more or less minimal gameplay. Again, similar to the Telltale games, you just mostly walk around, press some buttons, solve like maybe 1 or 2 puzzles, maybe press 1 or 2 buttons to like shoot some people with lasers. But it's also mostly about, you know, your character interactions and how your choices will impact the story. So yeah, if you're on the lookout for like a fun classic sci-fi story, go check out this one. Now let's jump into some more thrilling stuff. Let's talk about crime. And if we talk about crime games and thriller games, Danganronpa. Got to mention Danganronpa. I have an entire video essay on my channel where I talk about why I think Danganronpa is such a great gaming series. So I'm not going to talk too much about it here. Danganronpa is a Japanese anime or manga style video game series, very much a visual novel series with puzzle elements. The general premise of each game is a group of teenagers with various special talents is locked up in a school, and a battle royale begins. They are told they will only be able to leave if someone commits a murder and remains undiscovered. So, of course, murder happens. You try to solve these murders while also trying to get to know the people around you, trying to find out who they are, what their hobbies are, what their special talents are, while also constantly thinking, is this person maybe going to kill me? So this is very much a very intense gaming series. Slightly weird as well, because anime be like that sometimes. So there will be elements in this where you're like, yeah, no, that's not working. But honestly, this is one of the most thrilling and emotionally engaging video game series I've ever played. Like watch the video I say to find out more. But honestly, if you want to look out for like some like a little kind of gory but also like very intense, mind-blowing crime thriller stuff, play this series. Similar to the Danganronpa games is the Zero Escape series. I've talked a bit about those games as well. I think I did like a character ranking a while ago. The Zero Escape games are visual novels slash locked room mystery games. Similar to the Danganronpa games, each game has a group of people who are stuck somewhere and they have to solve puzzles in order to be released. Otherwise, murder and mayhem will ensue. So that's the general premise for this. This one is much more focused on the puzzle solving. This is very much about like locked room mystery, where you will always be stuck in a room and then you have to fight your way out of it. It's very much like escape room gaming. So this one is really one for the people who are really into puzzle solving. I'm not the best at puzzle solving, but I still like this series. And it's also about getting to know the characters. Each game has like a very colorful cast of characters, all different kinds of people with all kinds of varying backgrounds. And some of the later games also very much ask you to get into the motivations of these characters and asking you, can you trust these people? How far can you trust them? Personally, I think the first game is probably the best one. The other one's still good, but get a bit weird later on. And this gaming series also very much dives into some very cool meta-narrative stuff that I don't want to talk too much about here, because it's really part of the intrigue of this game series. This I think it's good. It has minimal gameplay. It's really just like point and click, like walking around, looking at things, solving puzzles, just like pressing a button, looking at stuff. So if you really like someone who like really likes solving puzzles, I think this is a great gaming series for you. And for people who like really just love reading a good crime book or good thriller book and just want to figure stuff out, how it happens, this is the gaming series for you. Let's talk about a crime game that's also very weird. Let's talk about Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium I actually haven't finished yet, but I played a good chunk of it, and I know it's quite a popular game online. Disco Elysium is I would say, visual novel, also again with some RPG elements. This game casts you in the role of a detective who wakes up not really knowing what the hell has happened to him last night, and there's a murder in the town where he wakes up, and he has to go and solve it while trying to figure out what the hell his own deal even is. So there are obviously some puzzle solving elements to this, lots of like walking around, talking to people, figuring out what, who did it, what's the case, figuring out some murder mysteries here. Obviously we have that. There's a lot of, there's some RPG elements involved with that as well, because you do assign certain attributes and levels and skills to your detective, and you do get the classic, rolling of the dice to see if certain actions or decisions you want to take in the game will work out for you. And depending on if they work out or not, certain things will happen in the game. So that's that. But it's not too complex, I think. This game is very much more focused on the narrative. There's a lot of reading. The game is also voiced now, so you do get narrational voices and voice acting for this as well. The voice acting for this game is brilliant, by the way. It's absolutely amazing. It's slightly weird. It's a little bit out there. It has some elements of, you can't quite say magical realism, but there is a sense of otherness to it within the narration. But first and foremost, it is very much, more of a crime story, since you play a detective who is intent on solving the murder. So this is very much more about, figuring this shit out, trying to talk to people, trying to figure out what they want, how you can help them, what you want, but also like who this detective is, what his relationship to himself is, and to the people around him. This is a little more complex, a little more out there based on vibe, but if you're like willing to read or into like crime stories with like a really interesting main character who's the detective, I think this is a good game for you. Let's go back to the Telltale games, and let's talk about The Wolf Among Us. The Wolf Among Us is also based on a previous existing series, namely a series of comic books. The Wolf Among Us is set in a universe where the fairy tale characters that we know and love are real, and they basically live in a very realistic, gritty version of our own world. And in The Wolf Among Us, you play the big bad wolf. You play Bigby, and he is a detective who wants to solve some cases. You actually work together with Snow White, who also works within the sort of like detective agency that you work in. There are some other familiar characters, Sleeping Beauty, there's Beauty and the Beast, the little piggies, they're all in there. So that you get fairy tale characters, you also get some characters from like folklore and stuff like that, from all kinds of different cultures, and they're all here realized in a more realistic way, essentially. And The Wolf Among Us tells an episodic story which starts as a murder mystery, but naturally then goes much, much deeper as you explore it, and also asks you once again to interact with these people to see who can you trust, who even likes Bigby, because, obviously you're the big bad wolf. You have a bit of a reputation. Again, you don't need to have any knowledge of the Wolf Among Us, of this pre-existing franchise. I didn't when I first played this, and I really, really like this game. So again, this is more like, again, for someone who's a bit more maybe into like crime stories, more into like some puzzle solving. Gameplay, similar to the other Telltale games, is mostly minimal. It's about walking around, looking at stuff, combining things. Check out some trigger warnings for this one, because it does get very gritty and realistic. Like, it's very much not fairy tale-esque at all. However, I really do like this series. Unlike the Game of Thrones one, this season is finished. There's actually going to be a second Wolf Among Us game coming out very soon. I'm really, really excited to play this. So until then, check out the first one. And let's stay with animalistic detective characters, because I would like to talk about Black Sad. Black Sad is also based, I think, on a comic book series, however, one I have not checked out. So Black Sad takes place in a world where we have humanoid animals, as you can see, and you take on the role of a cat detective who is very much your classic, trench coat wearing, like, classic 1920s kind of guy who PI who people call on to solve a case. And as always, it starts out relatively simplistic. You think you know exactly what's going on, but then you find out about, corruption, murder, affairs, betrayal, and you're right in the middle of it, just trying to do your best to solve this gosh darn case without being corrupted yourself. So this is honestly just one for the classics. If you're on the lookout for like a classic, almost like 1920s, 1930s-esque, gritty, classic detective story, this is the one for you. Again, requires mostly minimal gameplay. You like walk around, look at the crime scenes, talk to people, combine some elements, and make some narrative choices that will have some impact on the story later on. And I mean, if you can get along with it, humanoid characters, humanoid animal characters, that's what I want to say. You're honestly fine with this, and I think you will get a very cool classic detective story that you can't go wrong with. Now, moving on from the crime and thrill to the very scary thrill, let's talk about some horror games here at the end. And the first one I would like to talk about, Doki Doki Literature Club. I know, doesn't look like a horror game, and I don't even want to say too much here because this game is very much a big surprise. Doki Doki Literature Club is a visual novel with some little bit of romance, like dating sim elements, but mostly like visual novel. You are a guy who joins a literature club with some cute girls, and you're trying to get to know them. That's all I want to say, because there are some big surprises in this one that you really don't want to have spoiled to you. Just be prepared for some major fucked upness. That's what I'm saying. So if you're here on the lookout for horror that's a bit surprising, that's out there, actually kind of spooky, check this one out. Now we got to talk about the classic playable horror movie, Until Dawn. Until Dawn is like the playable movie horror game. Like, everyone really enjoys this within this genre. So this is very much a playable movie, as in we have a set cast of characters played by actual actors. One of them is Rami Malek. And it's essentially a teenage horror slasher movie. So this is about a group of teenagers who have recently gone through a traumatic experience because a prank went wrong and 2 of their friends died because of that prank. And now, on the anniversary of that death, they're all reuniting at the place where it happened to talk about the events that unfolded that night. Horror commences from that, naturally. So this is very much a classic horror movie as you could just watch it on television. But it's playable. You take on the role of basically every single teenager in this group, and you walk around, interact with stuff, and talk to people. This is very minimal on the gameplay. This is honestly mostly about like walking around, figuring like things out just like by picking stuff up, reading up on some details, building like sort of the narrative in the background, and then you interact with people. Here, similar to the Life is Strange games, it's very much heavily relying on your interactions with the people and the decisions you make within those dialogues, because those actions will have consequences later down the line. And the only like really bigger gameplay is that there are QTEs, so quick time events, meaning the game will very suddenly ask you to press a button very quickly. Otherwise, something bad will happen. I know not a lot of people like QTEs, but that's really only the only bigger kind of gameplay that you get in this. And as long as you keep the controller in your hand at all times, you're good. Mostly, I think. So this is very much, you can't go wrong with this one. If you want a classic teenage horror movie, but you want it playable, go check out Until Dawn. And then, last but by no means least, if you want more classic horror, if you love your classic horror story with some different touch now and then in every installment, let me tell you about the Dark Picture series. The Dark Picture series is very similar to Until Dawn, as in that they are essentially playable movies with a set cast of characters that you play as and interact with as the story unfolds. There are several games, I want to say 4, I hope I'm not messing that up now, 4 games, all with new stories, new cast of characters, so it's very much an anthology series, but they're all each like, I want to say 4, 5, 6, 7 hours long, depending on how quick you play them, I guess. Again, some real life actors in this one as well. For example, one of them has Will Poulter, there's, I think Ashley Tisdale's in one of them. So yeah, quite a bunch of famous people in there as well. And they all take on different horror aspects. So you have some about, there's like something set on a boat, so you have like something set on like an almost like haunted ship. You have something about witches, the witch trial. You have something with like vampire-esque creatures, but like set in Iran or Iraq in the early 2000s. You have like a classic Saw-like H.H. Holmes murder house. So there's like something different in each of these games, depending on what your kind of horror vibe is. So honestly, if you're like a Stephen King fan, like just like a fan of classic horror with a cast of colorful characters who get into some real trouble, and you want to be responsible for that trouble, or you want to be responsible for them dying because of those troubles, or have them survive, you can have a lot of fun with this series. Okay, that's it. Boy, I talked for a really long time. I talked for an hour. I'm going to put some timestamps, obviously, in case you hadn't noticed I had in the thing, so you can jump through the genre you might want. But I hope you were able to find something here. So if you're a bookworm, you love reading, I hope you've now found a game that could potentially awaken your love for video games. If you have any questions about the games I talked about here, or have any suggestions yourself, please put them down in the comments below. I would love to talk to you, would love to explain some more stuff to you. If there are other games you would love me to talk about, or if there's something you want me to highlight, anything, tell me. I would love to talk about more games like this in that way in the future, like sort of combining two things I like. Like I said, I focused here more on like more or less casual gaming things. Obviously, there are bigger games out there with more in bigger gameplay that would suit these genres just as well. So if you want me to do like a follow-up video where I talk about more intricate and like bigger and more well-known games that will also suit these genres, if you like reading those, you can tell me in the comments down below. I would always like to talk about video games and books, obviously. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking around if you watched the whole thing. Please do tell me down in the comments below if you've checked out any of the video games that I talked about today that you maybe hadn't known about before. So yeah, I hope I could awaken some potential video game love out there for the bookworms. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done already. And I'll see all of you very soon. Goodbye.